Hey there, viewers. Federal agents just recovered something from Oprah's house, and whatever it is, it's rattled people far beyond the investigation. The details are still coming out, but insiders are calling it one of the most disturbing discoveries in years. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The window that shouldn't exist. I don't care about celebrities, not in that way. I mean, sure, I know who Oprah is. Everybody does. You'd have to live under a rock not to. But it's not like I follow her or read tabloids or anything. I've got bills to pay, a car that's still not fully paid off, and an apartment I share with a cat that doesn't even like me. When I took this job with regional infrastructure compliance, I wasn't expecting glamour. Just storm season hazard surveys, slope erosion reports, a lot of mud, and the occasional passive-aggressive email from Brenda in payroll. That morning started like any other. I had a stale protein bar in the truck. Radio was stuck on some AM weather alert. The storm that came through a few weeks back had knocked half the coastline off its hinges. FEMA wanted retroactive structural checks on every cliffside property, and we got the short straw. My assignment was a weird one, though. The property didn't come with a name, just a number. Parcel 344C Seaview Bluff. Brenda had slipped in a quiet note. NDA required. Do not discuss. Whatever. As long as they signed the check. The gate was already open when I pulled up. No staff, no guard. Just a huge, pale house sitting on the edge of a cliff like it had been lowered there by something that didn't understand how weight works. The architecture was brutalist, mostly concrete with those long, flat windows that don't open. There were no cars, no security system blinking at me. Just silence and the sound of wind rolling up the bluff. I parked and got to work. My gear wasn't fancy. Basic scanner, some LiDAR mapping attachments, and a digital survey tablet. My task was just to assess potential erosion around the foundation, especially beneath the bluff line. The storm had been aggressive. Sandstone and clay bluffs like this one tend to slough off if there's been standing water or seismic aftershock. We'd had both. There was a service path behind the house. It wrapped around the back like a spine, narrow and overgrown. I followed it with my boots, slipping in the wet moss, and ducked under a bent-down chain-link section that had almost rusted through. There was a drop just past that, maybe 30 feet of sheer cliff. And from there, you could see the ocean below, slamming into the rock. That's when I saw it. I don't know how to describe it, even now. It wasn't something I was looking for. It wasn't on the blueprint. It wasn't even in a logical place. But there it was. A window. It was embedded halfway down the bluff, not facing anything but raw stone. No deck, no ladder. It was just there. Like it had been carved out of the rock itself. Square, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet, with thick, almost industrial-looking trim. Not metal, not wood. Something dull, smooth. I tapped it with my pen. It didn't echo like glass, it thudded. At first I thought it was a fake, just some architectural weirdness, maybe art. But when I squatted and looked closely, I could see through it. The inside of the glass was slick, like something had congealed against it and then dried. A residue. Amber and patchy like old varnish or blood that had been wiped off carelessly. The room inside didn't belong in that house. It was round, perfectly round. The walls weren't painted or drywalled. They were mirrored, floor to ceiling. The ceiling was mirrored, too. It gave the room a weird, endless effect, like it was caving in on itself. At the center, right where the reflections all converged, was a single wooden chair, and on that chair, carefully folded, was a white garment. It looked like some kind of robe, maybe linen, something ceremonial. At first, I thought it was draped over the back, but then I realized it was arranged, tucked, intentional. A few feet in front of the chair stood a tripod. On top of it, a camcorder. Big, old style, late 90s maybe, analog, pointed directly at the mirror. I took a few steps back. My brain was scrambling to find a reason for any of this. A performance art thing? A leftover movie set? Oprah's house. That's what the rumors said. That she used to own this place before transferring it to a shell company. And maybe this was just one of those eccentric rich person things. Some private theater. Or meditation room. Or projection study. But the thing was, the window didn't make sense. No staircase led to it. No door. From the inside of the house, there was nothing that connected to that part of the cliff. And the glass, it was thick, reinforced, maybe bulletproof, but dirty, like it had been there a long time. Untouched. I took photos, about a dozen, angles, close-ups, one with the LiDAR overlay. I logged the anomaly in my report as unlisted substructure, probable storm exposure hazard. That was the closest I could get without sounding like a lunatic. I emailed the report to my supervisor, Dennis. I even flagged it for escalation. That was around 4:17 p.m. I remember because my tablet froze after I hit send. It stayed that way until I powered it off manually. When it restarted, the report had been sent, but my photos were missing. I checked the card slot. The data was still there, but the tablet wasn't displaying the images anymore. So I copied everything to my personal drive just in case. The next day, I got a call. Dennis wasn't his usual grumpy self. He sounded rehearsed. "That window you mentioned," he said, "doesn't exist." I said, "It's in the report. You saw the images." "I didn't see anything," he said. "I don't know what you sent. The property has no record of any basement, no substructures at all, just concrete and bedrock. The client has confirmed there are no underground levels. But it's in the bluff," I said. "You can walk right up to it." He cut me off. "Your assignment's complete. No follow-up required. Do not pursue this further, and delete any unofficial data copies. Understand?" He hung up before I could respond. I drove back out there that night. I know it was stupid, but I couldn't get it out of my head. That room, the chair, the mirror, I needed to see it again. Needed to know it hadn't just been some weird trick of the light. The gate was locked this time. Chain and padlock. No light from the house, no sound. Just the wind again. I slipped down the side path, the same way I had before. It was darker than I remembered. The cliffside was slick, more eroded, like someone had scraped down a layer of the bluff. I made my way to the spot where the window had been. It was gone. The stone face had been resealed. Perfectly. Smoothed over with a fresh layer of cement. You wouldn't even know anything had ever been there. No frame, no trim, no outline. Just blank cliff. I stood there for a long time, listening, watching the waves slam into the rocks far below. There was no light behind the cliff now, no glow from the mirror room, just cold stone and silence. I went home. I didn't sleep. The next morning, my FEMA portal login had been deactivated. Credentials revoked, pending reassignment. I called HR. Got no answer. I emailed Brenda. Bounced back. I still have the photos. Not on my phone, not on the cloud. I printed them out, tucked them in a file under my bed, between a stack of expired car insurance forms and a winter coat I haven't worn in 2 years. I don't know what I saw that day, but I know it was real. And I know someone didn't want me to. Section 2, subject line, cycle ready. I didn't think much of the subject line when I saw it. You get numb to all caps in this job. Every file comes in flagged as urgent, immediate, restricted, or all three, and most of them are just mislabeled attachments from field agents who forgot how the naming system works. I was halfway through my second energy drink and knee-deep in mislabeled flood zone drone shots when it hit my screen. OP Bluff Cam South 3. G. It didn't belong. For one, the prefix OP wasn't a registered region code in our system, And second, it was listed under a holding folder called Cycle Data Unprocessed Legacy. That wasn't something I'd ever seen before, and I've been contracting for FEMA's Digital Archive Division for going on 7 years. I don't ask questions, I don't open things I'm not supposed to. But this one had already been auto-fegged for review by the AI sorter, and protocol meant I had to verify the contents before it could be archived. The email was dated 2 weeks back, but it looked like it had only just been routed in. The sender line was a placeholder, no _name at fema.ops.redacted, which is either a really bad prank or a serious glitch. The timestamp was strange too. It said, received March 22nd, 9:03 IMM, but underneath that, deleted March 20th, 5:14 PM. That didn't make sense. You can't delete something before it's received unless your server's caught in a time loop, and I've never seen that happen outside of a sandbox test. Anyway, I clicked in. It was a zip folder, about 600 MB. Inside, 5 image files, 3 raw sensor logs, and a text file that simply read, "Playback pending, prepare cycle." The photos were off. The first one showed a cliffside structure, barely visible through fog. Not the house itself, just the bluff. But zoomed in, you could see a rectangular window recessed into the rock, right where there shouldn't be one. The second image was darker, taken at an angle. A gloved hand held something like a LiDAR scanner in frame, and the readout displayed strange interference patterns. EM spikes, saturated fields, and one part labeled organic interference. Residual? The third photo was the one that got under my skin. It showed the inside of the window, a circular room, just like you'd find in a strange dream. The walls were mirrored from top to bottom, warping and bending the light so that the reflection didn't align with the geometry of the room. At the center, a chair with a folded white garment. A few feet from it, a camcorder on a tripod. The fourth photo was just static. I think it had been corrupted. The fifth was a scan of a hand-drawn map. The coastline was scribbled in black ink, and right where the window would have been, someone had written, "Portal sealed." Next to that, in red pen, "Do not restore." I stared at the images for a long time. Too long, probably. I even turned down the lights at my desk and leaned closer, like some part of me expected to see something moving in the reflections. I didn't, but it still felt wrong, like the images were waiting for me to do something else. I checked the asset ID, Bluff Redact, OPF3. That prefix shouldn't exist. I tried pulling the full property report to verify chain of custody. Normally, I can trace a report back through the regional office, the inspection agency, even the contracted engineer. But this one had no chain, no region code. The property title, when I tried to cross-reference it, returned a single word, CO. Then my screen glitched. I thought it was a power flicker at first. The lights didn't go out, but my terminal blacked out for a second, then came back with a new login prompt. It didn't say FEMA. It didn't even use the same font, just plain white on black, blinking. Cycle ready, do not restore window. It stayed there for 5 minutes. I couldn't do anything, couldn't click out, couldn't even hard reset. I pulled the plug and reconnected it. When it finally restarted, everything was gone. The zip folder had vanished from the queue. The photos, the logs, the text file, all wiped. It was like it had never been there. Except one thing had changed. A new file had appeared on my desktop, where no files should be stored locally. It was called Playback MP4. Before I opened it, my phone rang. Now here's the thing. No one ever calls me at work, not even my mother, and the number wasn't familiar. It didn't even look like a real number, just a string of digits, 000000000. I picked up, thinking maybe it was an auto dialer from the internal FEMA alert system. But it wasn't that. There was a voice, synthetic but broken, like a corrupted voicemail loop. It stuttered and popped, like someone had spliced together 10 different speech samples to form a sentence. "Don't open the sketchbook, don't open the sketchbook." The call dropped. I checked my call history, nothing there, no record of an incoming call, no missed call, no log. I didn't even think before opening the MP4. It was 6 seconds long, no sound, just black and white footage from what looked like a VHS camcorder. The quality was grainy, full of static hiss. The mirrored room, the chair, the garments still folded. And standing there, between the chair and the mirror, was Oprah Winfrey. She wasn't young. She looked the way she does now, or at least how she did the last time I saw her on TV. But she wasn't facing the camera. She was facing the window, facing me. It was like she knew I was watching. She didn't move, just stood there, breathing slow. Her reflection in the mirror was faint, not quite aligned. Her real body and her mirrored body seemed to be moving at different speeds. A delay, like one was on playback while the other was live. At second 4, she raised her hand slowly, like she was about to speak. But she didn't. At second 6, the screen cut to black. I watched it 5 times, then 10. I tried to pause it on her reflection. On the 4th frame, I noticed something else. In the mirror, the window. From the outside. From the same angle as the technician's original photo. It was like the reflection wasn't just showing her. It was showing what she saw. And she wasn't alone. There was someone outside the window. Maybe the technician. Maybe someone else. Maybe me. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, the system sent a soft alert across the top of the screen. Just routine auto-monitoring. User inactive. Locking session. But the lock screen didn't show the FEMA logo this time. It was black, with a single sentence. "You opened it, you saw her, the sketchbook will find you." I unplugged the terminal. I went home. I didn't tell anyone, I still haven't. But yesterday, a package showed up on my porch. No cinder, just wrapped in brown paper and sealed with red wax. There was no note inside, just a leather-bound sketchbook. Empty, except for the first page, a drawing of the mirrored room, and someone standing outside the window. Looking in, the dress folds itself. I didn't ask to be pulled in. I was 2 weeks into my vacation holed up in a rental trailer in Oregon with no cell reception and a pile of novels I swore I'd never read when the call came through. My clearance isn't usually tapped for emergency work unless something's contaminated or old enough to warrant a legacy-level protocol. The message was brief: federal reclassification of textile artifact, Opt 47, urgent analysis required, storm recovery anomaly. That was it. No subject, no signature, just a terminal flag that turned my dashboard red, and a 6-digit dispatch order. By the time I got back to the facility, the sample had already been delivered. Standard chain of custody was weird. There was no inbound manifest, no airlock scan, no receiving agent. It had just appeared in the secure lab drop box, still sealed in its reinforced transit crate. One of the techs said it came through FEMA, misrouted from a storm supply warehouse down south, but the paperwork didn't track. It had no FEMA case number. Instead, it was logged under an older template, Obligaun 47 monastic remains, the kind we reserve for medieval relics, burial cloths, or preserved ritual garb. That made no sense. I remember lifting the dress for the first time. It didn't weigh much, maybe half a pound at most. The fabric was smooth, dense, but not stiff. It felt like it had been folded by someone with a surgeon's precision, creased at perfect thirds, then tucked into itself, with the sleeves disappearing like wings drawn in before flight. No tag, no seams, no stitching I could see at first, just cloth, pale white, matte, but with a strange inner shimmer when it caught the light at the right angle. It wasn't cotton, not polyester, not silk, nothing my scans could identify. I placed it under the dissecting scope and ran the standard sweep, fiber composition analysis, UV light trace, infrared imaging, thermal response, and limited exposure to accelerant. The first anomaly came when I tried a burn test. I clipped the tiniest corner and set it under the flame nozzle. Nothing happened. No smoke, no curl, no odor. It just refused combustion. Same thing with chemical stress. Acids, enzymes, peroxide, bleach, all slid off the surface like it was shielded. I thought maybe it had a hydrophobic coating, but when I submerged a small strip in water, it didn't repel, it just sat there. The water turned cloudy, but the fabric was unchanged. Not wet, not dry. It was like it had existed outside of moisture altogether. Things got stranger under UV. I switched the lights to violet just to see if any organic residue would glow. Sometimes older garments retain skin oils or sweat along the seams. Instead, the whole dress began to glow, not brightly, more like a dull haze rising from the fabric, like low fog. Then the writing started to show. Not ink, not paint. It had been stitched directly into the fabric, but with thread so faint it only reacted under ultraviolet light. Tiny letters, lowercase, no punctuation, repeating phrases that shimmered in and out of legibility. The phrase I saw most often was this: I watched myself rehearse, I forgot my line, they filmed anyway. It was stitched across the back, along the hem, under the collar, inside the sleeves. Sometimes backwards, sometimes curved. In one spot, the letters folded into each other, so the sentence doubled back and looped itself. There were other lines too, scattered, almost like annotations. The audience was only mirrors. Silence is a kind of applause. What begins rehearsal ends testimony. I stood there for longer than I should have, reading the same phrases over and over. My eyes started to water from the strain. The room felt too warm, even though the AC was running. My skin started to itch, like the light itself was brushing against my bones. I shut off the lamp and blinked the images out of my retinas. That's when I decided to inspect the lining. The dress had no zipper, no buttons, just a flap on the inner torso seam that gave slightly when pressed. I worked it open with a thin scissor and folded it outward. There were bones inside. Thin, pale, wired to the interior with black thread that didn't match the rest of the garment. At first I thought they were decorative, or maybe symbolic, some old monastery garment with relics stitched into the lining. But the shape of the phalanges was unmistakable. These were finger bones, 5 of them, bundled and cross-tied. No articulation, just the top digits. And they weren't fossilized either. They were fresh enough that I felt the panic rise in my chest before I even confirmed they were real. I placed them under the scanner. Calcium levels, protein traces, marrow density. Human, not adult, child-sized. I contacted the oversight line and filed a priority match request. 3 hours later, the system returned a possible ID. Dental fragment cross-index, matched with a federal pediatric record from the Midwest. A girl, 9 years old, reported alive, not missing, living in Michigan. I blinked at the screen. The timestamp said the dental scan had been updated 6 months ago. Regular checkup. Impossible. I double-checked the match, reran the scan. It came back the same. The bones inside the dress belonged to someone who was still alive. I stepped away from the terminal and grabbed my phone. Tried calling the emergency review desk. The line rang twice, then went dead. I tried the secondary number. No ring at all, just silence. I walked down to the hall phone and tried from a different line. Same result. No tone, no error. When I came back into the lab, the dress was gone. At first I thought I'd misplaced it, but that was ridiculous. It had been laid out on the center table under UV clipped in place. Now the clamps were open and the table was bare. I checked the floor. Nothing. I checked the sealed waste bin, the storage shelves, the back case. Nowhere. It had just vanished. But something else was there. At the head of the table, angled just slightly toward the center of the room, was a mirror. Yes, I don't have a mirror in the lab. There's no reason to. The walls are bare metal. We don't bring reflective surfaces into secured rooms unless testing reflective artifacts. But this mirror was freestanding, about 5 feet tall, arched at the top, and framed in something old, metal scorched black at the corners. It looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. The mirror wasn't reflecting me. That was the worst part. It showed the room, my lab coat, the table, the door behind me, but not me. Instead, there was a girl in the reflection, standing barefoot, wearing the white dress. She wasn't moving, just standing still, head tilted forward slightly, hands clasped together like she was waiting for someone to speak. The dress didn't hang like cloth. It hovered, like it remembered its fold. The words stitched inside glowed faintly under the lab lights. One of the bones slipped from her pocket and hit the floor in the mirror. I heard nothing in the real room. Then she looked up, straight at me. Not angry, not scared, just tired. And the glass rippled. I blinked, and the mirror was gone. Just me in the room, sweating, heart pounding, trying to breathe. I filed the disappearance as an unauthorized removal. I marked the sample chain as broken and classified the object as a probable fabrication, just to close the report. No one's followed up. No one's asked me about it since. But every time I turn on my desk lamp, I catch the faintest shimmer in the air, like thread, like a loop, like something slowly folding itself again, waiting to be worn. Chapter 4, Seal 3, Playback Condition. Met. I've done hundreds of deliveries like this, maybe thousands, most of them forgettable. Half the time I don't even know what I'm hauling. A box is a box, a manifest is a formality. You show the badge, you sign the chain, you keep your head down. That's the contract. As long as the seals aren't broken, no one cares how curious you are. But that night, that one stayed with me. They paged me just past 2:30, IEME, emergency run, classified file transfer, category 3. I was on standby rotation, parked outside the depot in my usual spot, half asleep with the window cracked open. They didn't give me a name, just a code, DC Archival, Level B, and an address I'd never been to before. I was to report within 90 minutes, load at Dock 4, and proceed without deviation to the designated check. No stops, no discussion, just move the box. The crate itself didn't look like much. Black composite shell, no branding, no locks that I could see. Just a column of seals along the top lip, color-coded, red, gray, and a dull silver one I'd never seen before. It had no writing, just a stamped symbol that looked like an eye turned sideways, or maybe an open mouth. The manifest was thinner than usual. One sheet, no barcode, just a printed label at the top. File non-adjudicated residual materials. Authorization, Playback Vault 3, confirmed access condition. Contents, 1, X playback cycle, artifact, status. Rehearsal completed. That was it. No list of items, no agency header, no weight or size class, no known handler. I should have left it sealed, I know that now. But somewhere along the way, maybe outside the tunnel checkpoint, maybe during the 30-minute delay when the Eastern Gate scanners froze, I started wondering. I'd seen some strange things on the job. Radiation-proof briefcases, crates wrapped in prayer cloth, a child's car seat strapped inside a fireproof safe once. No explanation, just a label that said, psych evaluation incomplete. But something about this box felt worse, quieter, like it didn't want to be delivered. I parked 2 blocks from the final gate and pulled into a side lot near the river. Just for a minute, I told myself, just to get some air. But my hands didn't feel like mine when I broke the first seal. The red one peeled cleanly, no alarms, no trackers went off. The gray one dissolved like it was never real, like it had just been smoke pressed into plastic. The third seal, the silver one, resisted. It pulsed faintly when I touched it. Warm. But I pressed anyway, and the lid opened with a soft hiss. Inside, nestled in black foam, were 3 objects. The first was a VHS tape, heavy, labeled in black ink across a piece of white masking tape. Oprah. Final cycle, mirror facing. The second was a sketchbook, leather-bound, weathered at the edges like it had been held too many times by too many hands. Only one page had been marked, a single, stark pencil drawing of a window in the side of a cliff. No frame, just an open rectangle carved into stone. I recognized it, even though I'd never seen it before. The third item was a sealed envelope, wax-stamped. No name, no return, only 5 words written in looping script across the front. Witness must forget the script. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't have to. My hands were shaking by then. Something about the way the VHS tape sat in the foam. It felt arranged, performed. Like I'd walked in on a scene someone was waiting for me to see. A ritual frozen mid-performance. I closed the box, fast, too fast. When I looked at my watch, the second hand was spinning counterclockwise. I tapped the face. No change. I turned on my truck's internal clock. 7:12 p.m. Impossible. It had been 3:14 a.m. less than 20 minutes ago. I checked my phone. Blank screen, no signal, just a flicker. And then, for a split second, a line of text that blinked too fast to catch. Something about rehearsal. I don't remember the rest of the drive. Just that when I arrived at the delivery checkpoint, the guard looked confused when he scanned my badge. "You've already been logged in," he said. "Twice?" "No, this is my first run tonight," I told him. He frowned and checked the console again. "No, you checked in at 1:44 and again at 2:06. Security cam has you unloading at Dock 3. That hadn't even gotten out of the truck yet. He let me through anyway, said it was probably a glitch. Inside the facility, things felt thinner. The air had that pressurized quiet, like before a thunderstorm, where your ears won't pop right and the lights flicker for just a second too long. I handed off the box to the vault staff and signed the chain log. That's when I noticed something even stranger. The security footage looping above the intake desk. There I was, on the screen pulling the dolly down the hallway, only I wasn't holding the box. I was holding a mirror. Full length, freestanding, just like the one they use in dress fittings or those old dressing rooms with theater bulbs, except the mirror I was carrying had no reflection, just a shimmer, like the glass had been turned into water. The Volt tech caught me staring. He changed the channel. Said nothing. I left the building, quit the job that night. Didn't even wait for the final paycheck. Packed up and drove west. Didn't stop until I hit Nevada. Got a job doing warehouse inventory for a grocery chain. No more clearances, no more sealed boxes, just pallets and product codes, and the smell of cardboard. I tried to forget. I really did. But 2 years later, I was driving down High-80, middle of nowhere, heat warping the horizon, when I saw a billboard off the side of the road. It was old, peeling, blank, except for a faint image in faded black ink. A window carved into a cliff, and below it the words, "Legacy Foundation presents, playback begins soon." I hit the brakes, pulled over, got out, stared at it until my eyes dried up. That drawing, it was exactly the same as the one in the sketchbook. Same angle, same shading, same distortion in the stone. But there's no such thing as the Legacy Foundation. I checked. No website, no address, no foundation registry under that name in the state. Nothing. But the billboard was there, real, weathered, painted by someone. I haven't seen it since. The next time I passed that stretch of highway, it was gone. Just a blank steel frame with rusted bolts. Sometimes I think about opening the envelope. I kept it. Somehow it was still in my coat pocket the morning after. I don't remember taking it out of the box. I don't remember touching it. But it's here. And every once in a while, I hold it up to the light. Let my fingers trace the wax seal. 5 words etched in dark ink. Witness must forget the script. Haven't opened it. Not yet. Chapter 5. Testimony without a speaker. I had been working in the Office of Legislative Records for about 8 months when the file crossed my desk. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, reliable, and it gave me a windowless cubicle with a badge clearance higher than most interns my age could dream of. Mostly, I processed summaries of budget committee hearings, scanned outdated ethics waivers, and time-stamped rolling logs from subcommittees that didn't even exist on the public website. A lot of whisper-thin redactions. A lot of non-disclosable under current classification standards. Then, on a Wednesday that was already too cold for spring, a new case file was dropped off by hand. No envelope, no email trail, just a brown folder with a blue sticker that read, Level 7 Review, Discrete Playback Access Only. Inside was a single transcript, typed, dated, no speaker names, no seal of the chair, just a title at the top. Openlin Investigation, Nonverbal Evidentiary Review. Closed session. Playback type, reflexive repeat. At first I thought it was a misfile. Oversight transcripts usually follow a rigid format. Speaker labels, numbered objections, committee timestamps, all organized and keyword indexed. But this one was different. It was more like a weather report. Time-stamped entries every 22 seconds. No words. Just silence, interrupted by occasional phrases like, nonverbal gesture recorded, subject lifts mirror, playback ongoing, subject mouths inaudible phrase, emotional response, undetermined, subject appears to cry, playback unaffected. The transcript ran for 47 pages. It was monotonous and yet unsettling. There were no questions, no cross-examination, no mention of the person conducting the session. It was like watching one side of a phone call, except the other side wasn't a person. It was time itself, looping. Footnotes were scattered throughout the margins, each one stranger than the last. One in particular stood out. It was printed in a different typeface than the rest of the file, almost like it had been inserted by another hand, or machine, or something. It read, "The court recognizes playback as sufficient confession, language is suspended, legacy is inherited." I read that line a dozen times, tried to make sense of it. Was this a metaphor? A procedural clause? Something lost in translation from a classified hearing? I did what I wasn't supposed to do. I logged a formal request for the session's visual record. That required a sealed clearance override, which was usually denied by default. But somehow, the system didn't flag it. The request went through. 20 minutes later, I got a single-line response from a no-log sender. Playback restricted due to psychological distortion risk. Do not seek alternate formats. That should have been the end of it. But that night, when I got home, things got strange. I don't usually watch TV. I keep the noise down in my apartment. My neighbors are sensitive, and honestly, I've grown fond of the silence. but my streaming box glitched when I sat down. It flickered, rebooted, then skipped to a channel I hadn't selected. The screen stayed black for a few seconds. Then it began. Grainy footage, no color, just deep grayscale with that washed-out VHS quality. A single room, circular, mirrored, eerily familiar. A person sat in the center, alone, a woman. She didn't move at first, just sat, breathing slowly, holding something in her lap. A mirror. Her eyes were fixed on it, unblinking. I leaned closer. My living room felt colder than it should have. The television's volume was off, but somehow the silence had weight. I could hear the blood in my ears. The woman shifted, lifted the mirror, held it up like a shield, and for the first time, I saw the reflection. It wasn't her. It was me. I was sitting in her place, in that circular room, holding the mirror. Only the reflection wasn't in sync. It blinked when I didn't. It breathed faster. Its eyes darted left while mine stayed still. I stood up. The reflection stayed seated. That's when I understood it wasn't a mirror. It was playback. I turned off the TV, yanked the plug out of the wall. The screen stayed black. But even in the silence, I swore I could hear the soft shuffle of someone turning pages. The next morning at work, I reopened the transcript. Maybe to prove I'd imagined it. Maybe to reassure myself that none of this was real, that it was just exhaustion or too much caffeine. But something had changed. The document was no longer 47 pages. Now it was 48. The final page was new. It had only one entry. Mirror recognizes witness. Playback complete. Subject condition inherited. I checked the file metadata. No modification logs, no edits, no download timestamps. But the print queue showed one file had been sent to the floor printer at 4088. AYEMM. I hadn't been in the office then, but the system said my ID badge had been used to open the document. I haven't told anyone, but I've stopped looking in mirrors. Not out of fear, out of shame. Because I think I was supposed to say something in that room. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But someone filmed it anyway, and now it plays back, whether I remember or not. Chapter 6, The Archive That Drew Itself. I wasn't supposed to be in cold storage that day, my last day. I was meant to be upstairs, sorting outgoing records for digital scan and clearing my desk of paper scraps and broken pens. Instead, I was standing in a refrigerated vault surrounded by stainless steel shelves and brittle manila folders, trying to track down a single misplaced box from a retention request labeled Overly Recovery 8 Cycle. That's the thing about interagency work. Everyone thinks everyone else is accountable, and no one actually is. The box had been marked as digitization pending, but no scan logs existed, no signature trail, and the manifest was incomplete. Just a file reference and an old catalog number dating back at least 2 decades. Pre-digital, possibly handwritten. I told myself I'd scan it in, throw it in the bin, and clock out early. But part of me, I don't know, maybe I wanted something strange to happen. It was my last day. I'd seen enough weird case files and half-shredded interview transcripts to know that the good stuff never stays above ground. The box was jammed between 2 units marked for restricted military return, standard legal archives, except they were sealed with wax and barcode stickers that had long since stopped scanning. I pulled the box free and immediately knew it was wrong. The label wasn't typed, it was drawn. Black ink, tight script, too smooth for pen but too uneven for print. Across the top it read, Legacy Recovery, Cycle 8, Playback Incomplete, Sketch Pending. Inside, no folders, no paper. Just a single leather-bound sketchbook, maybe the size of a school notebook, and a dusting of something pale along the edges, like flour or ashes. I held it like it might fall apart, but it was heavier than I expected. I flipped it open. The drawings weren't clean. They weren't even artistic, just harsh, slashing pencil work, like someone had drawn in a rush, trying to trap images before they disappeared. The first few pages showed children on a soundstage under hot lights, repeating lines. Their mouths were open in some of the sketches, expressions contorted, not in fear, but in something worse. Confusion. They didn't know what they were performing, but they kept performing anyway. The next series showed a woman sitting behind a two-way mirror, her hand moving quickly across a pad. In each drawing, the position of the mirror changed slightly. Sometimes it was angled at her, sometimes at what she was sketching. In one frame, her sketch pad reflected the sketch itself, an endless loop of drawing the drawing of herself. The one after that shook me. A courtroom, mostly empty. No judge, no jury, just rows of chairs facing a bench that didn't rise above the floor, level with everything else. Behind the bench was a large mirror, cracked slightly down the center, the kind that warps your face if you stand in just the wrong place. In the reflection there was no room, only the artist's hand, still drawing. Then I turned another page and froze. It was my desk, my actual desk, right down to the chipped corner where I once dropped a coffee mug, the scuff marks on the floor from the time I dragged it closer to the heater vent. And behind me, on the wall where the supply cabinet usually sits, was a mirror. In the sketch I was facing it, but I was also holding something. The sketchbook. Today's date was written in the corner. Not typed, drawn. I didn't want to turn the page after that. My hands were slick, my mouth dry. I had a feeling, somewhere low in my gut, that whatever was on the final page wasn't going to let me forget it. But I did it anyway. I turned the page, and it was blank. At first. Then, slowly, lines began to appear. Faint, barely there strokes, like heat rising off pavement, curving, twitching, assembling themselves into a shape. My hand shook. I didn't move the pencil, didn't draw a thing, but still the lines kept forming. It was me, holding the book, looking down at it, and just below the image, scrawled in handwriting I recognized from the earlier sketches, were the words, "You are the final drawer." Turn the page. I dropped the book. It hit the floor face up, open to a different page than the one I had just seen. It showed the cold storage room, drawn in near perfect proportion, with every box, every shelf exactly where I stood. In the sketch, I was kneeling, reaching for the sketchbook, but in the mirror behind me, older, or tired, or simply erased. My terminal beeped. I ran upstairs, breath caught in my throat, heart hammering as I reached my desk. The screen was on. I hadn't turned it on. It should have been locked, but the cursor was blinking in a command prompt, typing by itself. Sketchbook witnessed. Playback ready. Final testimony uploaded. I unplugged it. Still it typed. "This is your mirror now." I smashed the power button hard. The screen went black. I turned to the wall behind me. No mirror. I checked the file logs. Nothing had been saved. No scan record. No session history. But the printer had jammed. I opened the tray. A single sheet stuck inside. Warm. Damp. It was a sketch of me. Sketching. And somewhere, maybe in the reflection, maybe not, Oprah stood watching. Not facing me, facing the back of the drawing, her hand raised, holding a mirror. And it was cracked. Chapter 7. The mirror room returns. They told me the property had burned. Electrical fault. Structural collapse, one of those post-disaster jargon phrases that means we cleaned it up, now move along. I wasn't even supposed to know, but when the call came, it was routed directly from someone inside the FEMA contractor hierarchy. Someone who used my name before I even introduced myself. Someone who said it wasn't a formal job, just a courtesy revisit, whatever that means. I didn't ask questions, not out loud, but in my head, I was already putting the gear together before I hung up. It had been over a month since I last stood on that bluff, since I saw the window carved into the cliff wall, the one everyone told me didn't exist, since they re-cemented the bluff like it had never happened, since they locked me out of my own inspection files and scrubbed the photos I took. But I kept a copy. I always do. Now they wanted me to return to the same location, same coordinates, except now the house was nothing but a shell. Fire had torn through it from the inside out. Stone cracked from heat, metal warped into ribbons, but not all of it. One room remained. The mirror room. They didn't call it that, of course. They called it a sealed architectural anomaly. FEMA had posted guards, temporary floodlights, and a small team of masked techs scanning the perimeter with handheld thermal readers, but no one had entered the room, not since the fire. Not until me. "You're the one who first logged the window, right?" the woman said, clipboard in hand, not looking up. She wore gloves and didn't seem to care that the place still smelled like scorched insulation and something older, deeper. "Yeah," I told her. "That was me. You'll recognize it." She unlocked the door and stepped back. The hallway leading to the room was barely standing. Half-burned studs, ceiling panels hanging by threads. But the room itself was untouched, like the fire had stopped at the frame, like it had chosen not to go further. I stepped inside. It was exactly the same. Circular walls, mirrors from floor to ceiling, no soot, no cracks, the same faint, distorted shimmer that made it hard to tell where the room began and where it ended. The chair was still in the center, wooden, simple, unburned. But the camcorder was different. Last time it had just been sitting there, aimed at the mirror, powered off. Now it was on. And playing. The small flip-out screen displayed grainy black and white footage. Oprah sat in the chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her mouth moved slowly, rhythmically, like she was reading something carved into the silence. She spoke one line, over and over. "Haley drew the window to forget me, but you kept it open." Then it looped, same breath, same blink, same inflection, over and over. There was no speaker, but I could hear her. I felt the words in the room like they were vibrating through the glass. I looked around. No wires, no power source, just the camcorder and the mirrors. And that's when I saw the second chair. In the reflection, it sat behind mine, just out of reach, but only in the mirror. In the real room, there was nothing there. No wood, no shadow, no weight. But in the reflection, someone was sitting in it. I turned around fast, nothing, just empty space. But the reflection showed me, seated, eyes wide, breathing hard, and behind me, another figure, unmoving, barely lit. Then I noticed something else. In the reflection, the camcorder wasn't pointed at the mirror anymore. It was pointed at me. Stepped to the side. In the reflection, the camera adjusted. But when I looked back at the physical camcorder, it hadn't moved, still fixed on the mirror, still playing the same 6-second clip. "Maybe drew the window to forget me, but you kept it open." Again and again. My hands started to sweat. I reached out to touch the mirror and stopped. There was a breath on the glass. Not mine. It fogged in slowly, from the inside, as if someone were breathing behind the mirror, not a reflection, a presence. Then a handprint appeared, pressed gently, slowly, from behind the glass. I stepped back, heart thudding. The camcorder flickered. Oprah's voice warped into static, twisted backward, until the loop reversed and she moved in reverse, unfolding her hands, blinking backwards, unspeaking her sentence. Then a new phrase appeared on the screen. Not typed, not embedded, just scrawled, shaky, flickering on the bottom of the camcorder's frame. I hear says complete. Recording you now. I turned again. Still no camera in the room. Only the mirror. But in its surface I saw something change. The walls no longer matched. The door I had entered through, gone. In the reflection, the room was sealed, smooth, circular, no exits. I was still standing in the real room, half expecting a tech to call me out, to break the spell. But there was no one. No footsteps, no movement, just that reflection. Just that camcorder recording something that didn't exist. I stepped back toward the doorway. My foot touched the threshold. That's when the light in the room shifted. Not dimmer, not brighter. Just different. Like I had walked behind a curtain I couldn't see. And then I was no longer sure which side of the mirror I was on. Because in the reflection, the man standing by the chair, the one looking confused, afraid, reaching toward the camcorder, that man didn't look like me anymore. He looked like someone trying to remember who they were. And someone had drawn him that way. Final inheritance, you. I didn't know what Operation Winfrey was when I signed the relocation contract. Most of us didn't. They just said it was legacy, media archive, reassignment, overflow processing. Nothing urgent. Just the kind of off-books cleanup you assign to clerks who work too fast, don't ask too much, and don't belong to any particular department long enough to grow roots. I'd been shifted between 3 divisions in the last 18 months, and this was supposed to be my final 1-week rotation before a break. The assignment came with a badge that didn't scan and a key card that opened no doors until it did. They bussed me in at night, no signage, just a concrete slope into the earth outside Maryland. One of those non-existent facilities with numbered elevators and fluorescent lights that hummed like they had something to confess. Playback Vault 3 wasn't what I expected. No stacks of hard drives or temperature-controlled cases. No evidence of violence or urgency. Just quiet, just order. Just rows of boxes, all black, all unmarked except for etched designations along the sides. 8th cycle. Poker therapy rehassle complete. Legacy recovery W. They didn't call it evidence, they called it media. Ceremonial fabrics, sealed in vacuum trays. Some stained, some burned. Dozens of VHS tapes, labeled only with hand-scrawled titles like Session 6, Session 6 View, or Mirror Unedited. More sketchbooks than I could count. Each one identical, leather-bound, slightly warped at the edges. When I cracked a few open, they weren't blank. They had already been filled. Drawings of rooms with no doors, faces drawn without eyes. The same courtroom, over and over, with no judge. Every now and then I'd find a photo, some burned nearly in half, others soaked and wrinkled beyond recognition. They weren't staged photos. These were candid. People halfway through a blink, caught between expressions, children rehearsing something, Oprah in the background sometimes. Not posing, not smiling, just standing as if mid-sentence looking at someone off-frame. After 6 hours of cataloging, I found the terminal. It was embedded in the wall, like it had been built into the concrete long before the vault itself. The screen was dark but warm. No power switch, no keyboard. No identifying mark. I tried walking past it. That's when it booted on. Lines of text began scrolling up from the bottom, one after another, blinking before vanishing again. Inheritance detective, sketchbook, cycle activity. Operation Winfrey, rehearsal complete, finalization in progress. Playback engaged, identity match, stand by. I stepped back. It stopped. No sound, no beep, just that sick mechanical awareness. That sense you get when something without eyes still knows how to see you. I should have left then. But there was one final box on my intake manifest. No barcode, no vault ID. It had been hand-delivered by internal courier, left on my cart without signature. It was heavier than the others. Inside, I found 3 things. First, a mirror, about the size of a dinner plate. The back was etched with words, not in ink, not painted, etched, cut deep into the glass itself. Playback isn't memory, playback is inheritance. And second, a USB drive, old, labeled in black Sharpie. Witness rehearsal, final draft. I didn't plug it in. Not yet. The third item was a folded letter, off-white, heavy paper. No seal, no return, just my name typed on the front in clean sans serif. I unfolded it slowly. My hands were shaking. The message was short. This was never Oprah's house, it was your reflection. Underneath, in smaller type. You saw it, you filed it, now you remember it. I dropped the paper. The lights flickered. The terminal came alive again. This time, it didn't scrawl. It typed, one word at a time. Slowly, like someone was watching me read it. The window was drawn for you. Then another line. The testimony was yours, you rehearsed, we watched. The screen went black for several seconds. I turned, half thinking the lights had gone out completely, but the rest of the room remained perfectly lit. Then one last message blinked onto the screen. Playback begins, with you. I stared at the words, waiting for them to change, to vanish, to mean something different. They didn't, but I could see my reflection in the monitor. Not crisp, not true. The color was off. The movements were just slightly out of sync. Like it wasn't playback anymore. It was recording. And behind me, in the screen's reflection, someone else was standing in the room. Someone holding a sketchbook. Someone turning the page.